But we're very thrilled to have her back in Minnesota. She studied here at the Humphrey School and then took some of those learnings back to India, where she worked on a project called Mission Convergence. And I don't know if you're going to talk a little bit about that today. And I'm personally thrilled that she has sort of taken those lessons and learnings, both from here in Minnesota and her whole life and her Mission Convergence work, to bring all those skills and knowledge to work for women in India. And we had a nice little lunch here where we had some conversation, and was thrilled to hear about the work she's been doing to make all issues women's issues, to move women's issues from the margins and try to drive federal government in India towards all of the departments viewing women's issues as important and central to the work that they're doing, and work to make women's work count, whether it's in the home or in the formal economy, and all of her other efforts, which I'm sure she's going to talk more about today. Also just want to, as a group, congratulate her again. She's here to receive a leadership award, and we're all very excited because she's such a great recipient of that award. So thank you very much for being here, and I'm going to turn it over to you, and then we'll hear some remarks and then have some time for questions and answers.
Good afternoon, everybody. And thanks for giving me this opportunity to be able to, once again, with some of you who were there already and with some new faces that I see, be able to communicate, some of my thoughts, ideas, practices, learnings, and experiences, which I'd like to share with you, with a particular focus at this juncture on the National Mission for Women Empowerment, which I was particularly asked to focus upon, to introduce, what it is. But I would also take the opportunity to go back to some of the learnings from Mission Convergence, particularly on that aspect of Mission Convergence which impacted women in terms of the agency that we created, the institution, the structures that we created, which impacted women, called the Gender Resource Centers. So some of the learnings, there would be shared with you. With this, I would like to formally, begin with some structure that I created over here, which introduces the mission, the national mission, first as in the nomenclature of Mission Purna Shakti. Purna Shakti in India, in Hindi, would mean holistic empowerment. Because just the name of National Mission for Women Empowerment probably did not bring about the kind of philosophy that this national mission had embedded in it at the outset, which was, looking at a very, very holistic dimension of empowerment. In terms of the government's perspective on women empowerment, we've had our intent translated into 5-year commitments, which we call the 5-year plans. Right now, the country is in the process of making the 5-year plan, which would be operational from the year 2012 to 17. The way the trends have been changing in our country, as one can see that from the first to the 5th 5-year plan, we used to focus on making of special schemes, for the welfare of women. 6th 5-year plan, there was a shift in approach from welfare to looking at the development of women. And the 7th 5-year plan, the focus shifted from development now to empowerment and having greater sensitivity in the allocation of resources across different ministries. Next, we saw the shift of empowering women at the grassroots through the Panchayati Raj institutions, which I talked about in great detail in the session just before this, when we said that there's a huge wind of change which is coming in, and that change is the democratization which is happening at the grassroots through an affirmative action of the government which provides for reservation of seats to the extent of 50%, up to 50% in the elected village council and the urban local bodies. We saw a shift to looking at women's component plan where the allocations, the budgetary allocations, had to have a mandate of keeping 33% of the funds meant for women-based programs. And then the realization that just the outlays will not be translating into the kind of outcomes that we have been looking for. So the shift has now become to looking at gender impact, the outcomes, and the mainstreaming across different departments. And next, the last 5-year plan saw the shift towards a more inclusive and integrated economic, social, and political empowerment. Given the intent of the national policy for empowerment of women, which talks about very laudable objectives. However, to translate the same, a strategy, a mechanism was required. What that mechanism has been, in order to address the kind of problem which we still saw, the problem was that the country had been seeing economic boom over the period with a very high GDP that we could be proud of in terms of our economy is doing well. However, the growth was not getting translated with a kind of equity which would ensure that the most marginalized would also be a part of our development fabric. We also realized that despite the fact that we have umpteen number of schemes and programs and resources put into the various so-called welfare programs, the access was a huge issue for the women who were still at the fringes. What does one do about it? There was a committee of governors which was set up to look into these bottlenecks, which recommends establishing a national mission with a very high-powered apex body under the Prime Minister, the executive head of our country. So this national mission was decided to be set up, with the 13 different ministries which had a major impact on women. For example, the Ministry of Human Resources, the Ministry of Panchayati Raj, which looks at the local self-government. The Department of Women and Child becomes a nodal department. So first time the realization that just setting up and strengthening one department, that of the women and child, is not going to be truly empowering enough to translate the objectives into reality. And it has to be a cross-sector collaboration of different line departments and ministries to work together to look at the common goal of women empowerment. This is how I just try to introduce the national mission to you, which looks at gender as a cross-cutting issue, which recognizes the fact that unless you look at these components together, we will not be able to fully justify the growth and development that we envisage. In the social empowerment, we are looking at women's collectives and self-help groups and literacy. In the economic empowerment, we are looking at creating value chains, skill training, developing entrepreneurship. in the political and legal empowerment, we're looking at creating more and more of women into the decision-making bodies, bringing them into the fold of our local bodies. So the mission statement that we give to ourselves is strengthening those processes which look at gender equality and justice through intersectoral convergence of programs which look at forging of synergy amongst a wide variety of stakeholders, which look at creating an environment which is conducive to social change. Because as government, we fully believe and realize that the change that we are trying to bring about cannot come through government programs, schemes, welfare measures alone. We as a government, we need to bring about change also in the social practices, in the social norms, in the gender stereotypes, in the cultural practices which preclude the kind of development that we are looking for to mainstream women. With this, the focus that we have adopted for our mission looks into certain identified areas such as access to health, drinking water, sanitation, hygiene. Given the fact that majority of the women still do not have access to toilets at home. We look at education as a very primary focus with coverage of girls, especially those to vulnerable groups. Higher and professional education, given the fact that there's very high dropout rates at the secondary level, at the senior secondary level. I've just talked about winds of change because in the 2011 census, we find a very promising trend emerging with the gender gap in literacy getting reduced, with the enrollment at the primary level improving by leaps over the previous figures which we saw in the 2001 census, with the dropout rate also reducing for girls. But much more needs to be done because still the gender gap is high enough. The focus is on gender sensitization, including that of the public functionaries who are supposed to be delivering services and programs for women. We are looking at the issue of violence against women as a focus. We are looking at gender mainstreaming of the policies, programs, and processes of government as also of other institutions. For example, we have a sexual harassment bill at workplace in the pipeline, which is now looking at not just regulating those who are working in the government, but also regulating those who are working in the private sector, which was earlier missing. What are some of the key strategies which we have adopted? This is becoming a buzzword in India today. The convergence, the mission convergence in Delhi. Thankfully, from the early successes, now I find that in many of our programs and across different state governments, a lot is being talked about convergence of schemes, programs. And I feel that I personally need not just one, but number of sessions to talk about convergence. Because it's most talked about, but very less understood. Convergence of what? Convergence at what level? How do we make it really effective? Do the resources converge? Do the programs converge? So I would really need a separate session, which probably, Laura, sometime in the future can organize a session for all of you in India or New Delhi itself, to talk of this convergence. Our strategies towards economic empowerment are those looking at skill, those looking at giving microcredit, the financial inclusion, which one of our young friends in the session just before talked about. We're looking at strengthening of the collectives of women to give collective voice, to make them more organized, to have better negotiation skill, better bargaining power. We're looking at localized communication strategies, the strengthening of public education on gender issues, their rights and their entitlements. We just talked about the fact that many of the families which are otherwise supposed to be much more enlightened and privileged, and yet there is lack of knowledge about their legal rights, lack of knowledge about their basic entitlements. We are trying to build capacities of functionaries at different levels through this national mission. We're also trying to forge better partnerships between the government, civil society and the Panchayati Raj institutions. There's a lot of emphasis also on research, evaluation and reviewing of their existing schemes, our existing legislations. There's no dirt to the number of good programs and to the number of laws which are meant to protect the interest of women. Yet why is it that we still are not able to have the kind of impact? So is the gap in intent? Is the gap in enforceability? And how do we strengthen the same? So that's one of our mandates. We're looking at using the tools of gender audit and gender budget as instruments to do gender analysis of different schemes and services across ministries. So basically, if I were to sum up the National Mission Strategy, it's three-pronged. At the macro level, what we are looking at is strengthening the processes for gender mainstreaming at the policy level, bringing about rationalization of schemes and programs at the national level, better oversight, reviews, monitoring, impact assessments. At the meso level, we are looking at improving the delivery of our services. And at the micro level, looking at generating more awareness, identifying the most vulnerable. It is here that, once again, Richa sitting here would identify with the kind of practice that in Mission Convergence we adopted as a building block, as the foundational process, which was identifying the most vulnerable first. Because otherwise, all our efforts, they will not yield the desired result if our targeting itself has been skewed, which in a conventional approach, towards looking at the inclusion of people who are supposed to be poor has somewhere down the line compromised. There's a huge debate in our country today on the issue of who the poor are. How do we define the poor? How do we identify the poor? There are a number of committees looking into this issue. And we come up with our simple experience and we say that, look, we tried this method and it worked for us. So thankfully, we were included into influencing the policies of like how to identify the poor, whether it was the Department of Rural Development or the Planning Commission or the Ministry for Urban Poverty and Alleviation. So this is another interesting dynamics which I will not be able to go into the details as to what our principles have been, because that needs another session to explain how to map, how to identify what criteria we follow, what principles we follow which were objective, which were easily verifiable, which were more transparent, which was our way of offering an alternative, to the system, in which we could see that the people whom we were including were not poor, and yet we were, focusing our services on them. At the micro level further, along with identifying, creating that identity, somebody just talked about, in the previous session, about our effort at the unique identity of people. The so-called UID is a national program which is going on in the country to give a unique identity, which can then ensure access to other programs using that unique number. I can boast over here that, in the mission convergence, even before the UID came up, in our own modest way, we just tried to create nothing else but a unique number, computer generated, use it for our own, government programs within Delhi. And it worked. And then when the UID came, we said, well, we've given that number, so we'll transport it to that now. So that became easier for us. And the challenging part was, who do you begin with? Do you begin with those who are already there in the system? We said that no, we want to begin with the toughest to reach, the hardest to reach, which is the homeless. So I was the first registrar in Delhi and the second in the country for the Unique Identity Program. And believe me, it was a very, very, very satisfying moment for me that the first UID which we created was for a homeless, a woman, and elderly. So I would say 3 kinds of vulnerabilities combined together. But with the identity, she also got a bank account. With the bank account, she had a way of keeping her daily earnings, saving, which she did not have earlier. So they were living on a day-to-day basis with no shelter. You don't have a place to keep whatever you earn for the day. It gets stolen. So those things really mattered to them. I felt that for me the bank account would not matter as much, but for her, even if it was saving just $2, but it mattered to her to keep in that account. So, this is how, unless we, through the whole entire, missionary approach, it's weaving of these 3, tiers together, which we believe ultimately leads to the empowerment of women. If one of these pillars is not complete, somewhere the balance would not be struck. This is incidentally our, the seat of power, our North Block, where we have the ministers of different departments, ministries there. So our approach has been, sitting at the federal government, our approach has been to link these various corridors of power together into this national mission, so that it is a work not just of the Ministry of Women and Child, but it is a coordinated response of the various line ministries to look at women empowerment holistically, and to look at women, not as, I would say, as welfare recipients, but to look upon them as clients, to look upon them as entitlement holders, who come up with certain basic entitlement of dignity and rights. This is the kind of structure that we have given to ourselves. In the structure, interestingly, when Laura, we were talking in the morning about the fact that we have a very active process of engagement with the civil society organizations, and how my work and my thoughts get also informed a lot by what I learned from them. When I had created the first time this structure, that structure looked like a very hierarchical structure. It said National Mission Authority headed by our Prime Minister. And then, we have the, there's a directorate, and we have all the states, and then we have at the district level, we have centers. Then, we have the intermediate level center between the district and our lowest, denominator, which is the panchayat level. So I had just drawn a hierarchical thing. So this, this colleague of mine, whom I really, admire, for her resilience towards all these issues. So she told me that, Rashmi, why do you need to create such a hierarchical structure? She said, even when you draw it, it's like, you can't just think of. I said, but I don't know how else to represent it. So, well, 5 minutes we thought, and then, together we came up with this. And so then, the word, now this word wasn't mine. In fact, she informed me. She said, no, look, doesn't this look like a seamless cyclical structure? So for a bureaucrat like me, who probably does not know that kind of a jargon, but I'm open to that learning. So I realized that, okay, if you draw it like this, it looks hierarchical, so which doesn't really convey a good, notion of equality between all the partners. So that's how this came up. That, this is, so I'm not going to explain the structure, but then there's something called the core and the periphery and how they blend, and between the grassroots level and the topmost being the Prime Minister. So I'm waiting to, by the way, show this to our Prime Minister, so that they also realize that they're not sitting at the top, and it's all the So I've not got that opportunity to show it there, but I'm sure I would one day, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. So this is the kind of structure which we have given to ourselves, because the structure that I said at the level of our topmost executive of our country, so that will obviously look into only the policy matters and oversight. But we have brought in the community-centered nodes as well, with the elected representatives, with the community bodies, the village level centers. So that's the uniqueness of the program. That a federal program not just resting at, say, the state level, but going to the district and the sub-district level as well. In order to bring about the mission into a reality from a concept, so far what we've done is a lot of regional workshops and field visits, and looking at gender focal points at the district level, at the state level. Started with gap analysis, encouraging the states to come up with honestly where they feel that there is a gap in the existing programs, critiquing even that of the central government. We talk a lot about some of our flagship schemes like Narega, which is a very popular scheme studied widely across different countries, which gives the right to work, the right to a certain guaranteed minimum number of days of work. So critiquing of that and critiquing of many others, so that we are encouraging. We are developing standard communication modules as how to look at the gender issues. When we go to the various states, there are a lot of regional differences. I just talked about Rajasthan, and Uttar Pradesh is the most populous state, Assam. Now here, when I looked at the issues which are impacting women, I was informed that witch hunting today is a serious issue of concern. I didn't know about it. So every state is coming up with, like in Rajasthan, the way you see this man wearing the headgear. So similarly, in fact, I should have, but I don't have it here. I was talking about the women, I can't see their face because it's all veiled. So that's another practice. Okay, so
witch hunting?
Witch hunting, yeah. They said that the day I arrived over there, they said that today in the newspaper, it's in our local village, there's a woman who was sent away, ostracized by the family because she was, her characters were ascribed to be that of a witch. And I believe later I discovered that it's because of the man wanting to marry somebody else that you put her into that bracket, and then she's just ostracized from the community. So how do we tackle that kind of superstition? So that was so it's like I just said that it's more challenging to me than Delhi mission convergence. Yes, there was a huge challenge of the urban sprawl and the migration issue and the identity of those who are coming from different cities. But in context of our regional variations, these cultural practices which differ from state to state. But what's important is that we bring them to the fore, not push them under the carpet. Once it is brought to the fore, I'm sure that we're going to have solutions customized to looking at changing these local mindsets as well. But along with the community groups, along with the local village collectives, because otherwise it cannot work with a prescriptive approach. So how do we look for solutions along with the local bodies? So as we went along, we are talking to these, when I said that along with the local bodies, sensitizing them. I was talking about my experience of talking to local officials, who are part of the Panchayati Raj institution. Because their notion of women empowerment would greatly differ from what you and me would understand of women empowerment. So how do we talk of the same language? How do we develop that, understanding of what we're trying to do? Then also identifying areas of voluntary sector cooperation and private sector collaboration. Interestingly, I've written Pali, Rajasthan because that was my last visit that I went to. And I saw that a religious leader over there, now he has come up with such amazing programs for girl child and become like a crusader for this issue of fighting the declining child sex ratio in our country, at least in the state where he belongs to. Amazing interventions, where the moment they come to know that the family, somebody's pregnant, so they have they develop a relationship with the family, where the community volunteers that he has encouraged, and he has a huge fan following in that state. So those volunteers, then they start, developing that, cultivating a trust, with the family and making sure that the child, the female fetus, if so detected, is not allowed to get aborted. And making sure that when the child is born, who's a female child, this group of religious leaders, they go with all sweets and drum beats and celebrate. They don't do it when a boy is born. They celebrate when a girl is born, which is very rare. Even my brother tells me that when he gave birth to the second daughter, so there were some other relatives who had come to the hospital, and when they heard that it was a second daughter, they were like, okay, so we had got some sweets, but now we'll take it back. That. It's very funny, but it still happens today. So my brother had to say that, well, I'm going to throw a bigger party than what I gave in the first daughter, so as a statement. But then I'm really glad that the religious leaders are. We need more and more like that, because it's an island in terms of one state, coming out. But I got promised by the same religious leader that if I need his services across other states, he will do that. And that came as a huge support for me. Because, people watching every day on TV. And I didn't know about him till the time that I met him there. And, I believe that, he's known to be one of very famous astrologers, and, so people watching every day, they go by his word. So if we have more and more people becoming crusaders like that. Then we are encouraging various departments to come up and create awareness about the various programs. So, as a model, which we demonstrated in Pali, that let's have just convergence exhibitions, where under one roof you're able to, the women who come, they get to know about, the various ministries' programs. Otherwise, they have to keep running to the different departments. We are coming with the directory of the women's self-help groups and collectives locally, which are already constituted. But over the period, then they die out because they have been constituted with some external intervention till the funding support is there. And once the support withdraws, you don't know, what these collectives are doing. So we are trying to now focus on channelizing the strength of these collectives so that they become the change agents locally available for us that we invest on. For me, personally, there's been a departure from what I was working for in the Delhi model. Because in the Delhi mission convergence model, I was still banking more on the NGOs, building their capacity to act as, catalyst and to bring about the change. But now, nationwide, somehow, my experience has informed me to invest resources more in building capacities of these collectives which are staying there so that they can, contribute towards their growth, their development, by direct access rather than always needing intermediaries. So that's a change which, Laura, I did not talk about earlier, but I feel that, NGOs also maybe, they can be facilitators in the short term, but they can't be a long-term dependency. So, and when we have these, alternatives on whom we can invest our time and resources, we are also building into, collecting gender disaggregated data, looking at the resources existing, looking at, assessment of how well the local resources are functioning. This is like a sarpanch. Yeah, I see the one in the wheel. So she's like, the moment I went, this is like Rajasthan again. So she greeted me with, the shawl and, but here I can partly see her face. But there were many women whose face I couldn't, yeah. But she is a locally elected sarpanch of a village council's leader. She has a lot of resources at her command. But it's just that, we were talking in the other session that right now, it is the voice and the authority and the final call of the man in the family which is still prevailing. But the fact that they have started stepping out now, even if it is with their husbands, is a good change. So this is the kind of so all women, this is the local panchayat. This is how the panchayat looks like, the village council looks like. And this is where, I was informed about their notion of women empowerment and what the local official. So this is the same meeting, in fact. So here, so one gets to, know about more of their issues, and encouraging more and more of such collectives is what, gives us greater confidence that, today they are ready to step out of their house at least. Yeah, so this is they're all the, how the women in Rajasthan who are, better off than others because they are already elected members. So they are panchayat members, one is a sarpanch. So they have crossed, one huge barrier, in terms of getting a legitimate, access to seats of power. So going to the schools and, knowing about the supply problem over there, the Anganwadi centers. So, again, like, as I said, that the national mission for women empowerment, earlier, and which is attached to the Department of Women and Child. Now to think that, one would have restricted one's work, only to schemes implemented by the ministry would not have given me the kind of access which I have today of, say, visiting, the education centers, visiting the panchayats. So, the notion here is that, look at the larger governance issues, not just women, as, in a segmented manner of looking at their empowerment through, notion of equality, which does not translate into, their day-to-day access and to the basic services. So that is the kind of like change which through the national mission we are trying to drive home. They have a nice practice now of the pregnant woman. Now her pregnancy is getting celebrated. So I was asked to give her the sweets the day I was there. So it's called God Bharai ceremony. Sudha, you would know about it. It's the God Bharai ceremony. So they're celebrating that pregnancy. Yeah. Incidentally, now I have somebody covered with the wheel also over here. But the good part is that they're coming out. And the other good part is that they are coming out, more collectively. Because that collective voice is giving them much greater strength to voice their concerns and also know that, okay, there are, others who are going through the similar problems. And collectively they are looking for solutions.
Excuse me, this God Bara ceremony is for both baby girls and baby boys? Or?
Yeah, actually, if you're not going for ultrasound, then you don't know. Yeah. So, then it's like value neutral. The danger is going for that ultrasound, and then going for that sex selection. I believe, many of such women are being discouraged to come to the centers. If the intention is that if it is a girl, we are not going to have the girl, then their families do not want to expose them to these centers. So it's kept secret. Yeah. But the religious leader that I talked about, so they say that, they keep going and, they kind of, conversation around the well to know who's got pregnant, and then they track. So in the process, they have managed to reverse the child sex ratio in that area because they track such families. For those who may not be very familiar with the context, why I'm trying to drive home this fact is because it's a matter of concern for us that in the 2001 census, we had 927 girls to boys, 1,000 boys. In 2011 census, it's dipped down to 914. That's really a matter of concern for us. Because if somebody says, why you all are wanting to do, so much in the name of women and this, that's one alarming fact that tells us that something very serious has to be done. Because it's not natural. Obviously, it's not natural. So these are kind of I said, that the sensitization of the public functionaries. When you talk to, make them talk and they are, all, now the block level, at least we have these public representatives who are in a position of authority. So, the work also involves that you are making them look at these local solutions. When we went to Rajasthan, look at the sea of women who just came along wanting to know what we are trying to do. There are very few men. And we, gave them a pledge, of against female feticide. So it's their minister and, my minister, for women and child. So together, a pledge is getting administered. And just as symbolically to, kind of incentivize some women who had done well. So they were given like, sewing machine to start with. But, we are encouraging more and more such practices where women are not just dependent upon grants, but women are provided with means to, augment their own income earning capacity. In fact, I'm tempted to share with you my experience of Brazil, where I went to look at Bolsa Familia, which is, it literally means a family grant. And it's a conditional cash transfer program where you give income support to a family based on the condition that you would send your children to school, ensure a minimum degree of attendance, you'd bring your children for immunization. If you're pregnant, you'll make sure that you are vaccinated and all that. So here, some of the women that I spoke to, they said that, well, it's not that we want to live on grant, and we want job. So it was basically like, looking at, our notion of empowerment again is like, bringing us more and more to the realization that you need to build the capacity and their capabilities and provide them with the right opportunity. So that women are fully able to develop their productive capacity. And we seem to be contributing to the nation's growth and not just to be seen as, victims of poverty and, to be supported, through welfare grants. With this, I'll from the national mission, I'm just switching to what informs this model is partly, not fully, but I'd say partly, the gender resource centers, mission convergence, Delhi. Why I said not fully is because the Panchayati Raj, the local government institution, that is something new here, which is not in the Delhi's model, which has been talked about there in that board which is lying there. I could see that, something is written about mission convergence. And one of the interns who went there to study, he's described well as to what he saw there. So the major difference now is, building capacities of the local women, building capacities of the panchayats, providing them more of resources. But through the Delhi model, what influenced us? Delhi, I was the founder director for this mission convergence program. When I talk about the Delhi's model, that experience now is useful to kind of take the learnings, nationwide, with obviously, the customized practices related to, with reference to the regions in mind. So here, what was very successful in terms of the women focus that we adopted was coming up with integrated women-centric structures, whose role became the structures, owned by the community organizations, community-based organizations, funded fully by the government, the NGOs whose capacity was developed by the government, the oversight was done by the government. But the role of these centers has been to guide the community, to bring about greater awareness, to tell women about their entitlements. Although it also leads to clash at times, because if you make the community very aware to talk of, to demand more, and then your services are not commensurate enough, your supply side is not strong enough. So there is a potential tension also. But, that's all in the, I would say, it's a transitory phase, because more the demand, more the pressure, over the period, it forces the institution to respond to that demand, even if it is not immediately fulfilled. So the kind of even in the Gender Resource Center, our experience was that we did not segment into the needs. We adopted an intersectoral approach where we looked at value additions through vocationalization, through self-help groups, linkages, and creating micro-enterprise. And I have 2 books over there where we have like these, some of the practices, described. I just noticed that, one of the interns who went from here, Mike, his, interview is also here, and Sudha was viewing, one of our practices there and commenting on it, which was our women running the canteen at the Delhi Government Secretariat. So, which is the seat of power in Delhi for our Chief Minister, who's on the 3rd floor, and just on the 2nd floor there's a canteen. So this canteen was being run by private operators, contractors. And then one day we decided that no, why can't our women whom we are skilling, run it? So at that point of time, people had less of confidence, like, you feel that, okay, you train the women and let them, do something somewhere. But what you forget is that, why not right under your nose? So we experimented with that, and, it was like taking a huge risk, because we have our cabinet ministers and we have all the VIPs, and with, the notion of, wanting to get something better than others. With, lesser confidence in the ability of these women's groups to provide them with the right. But believe me, the kind of services which the women did, like we changed the contractor, and, so the self-help group, they took over the canteen. So initially for 3 months there was a huge struggle, and, there was all attempt by our general administrative division, which was hand in glove with the previous contractor, to make things so difficult that the women will run away. But they didn't. So, now it was not just an excellence, in isolation or an innovation in isolation, because that became like a trendsetter for many such other micro-enterprise models, including, people from the Planning Commission. Our Deputy Chairman Planning Commission, Mr. Montek Singh Aluwalia, much talked about, a bureaucrat there in India. You would know. Yeah. So, they came for a meeting, and after the meeting, we said that, do you care to, and because meeting was on vocationalization and, national skill mission and all. I said, well, we're talking of very broad general things, but then let's see how we can get, from skilling to actual employability, and employability to actual employment. So we went there, and, there were other members, and, then they said, no, everywhere we have to have this model. So we are fighting for these kind of policy changes also, that, why give things then to private one or two contractors, and, why not let women self-help groups? As a part of our policy, we encourage to say, provide uniforms to our children in schools, say, provide nutrition to, our integrated child development services and our midday meal programs. And that's another, one of the practices which I very, very fondly recall during the course of my career. That it was a risk. People said it won't work. Because we were asking women self-help groups to make food for the children and to transport it and take it there. And believe me, today that enterprise has given livelihood to around 5,000 women. Because the kind of numbers that they are providing nutrition for is huge. That's another debate in our country. There's some people who say that no, it should be a centralized model. Whereas in our economy we need more of decentralized and local employable models where you can put more and more of income earning opportunity to the women. So that worked, and even the quality of nutrition improved. Then of course looking at the same issues of in social empowerment, when we say we're looking at health, and so there were very simple things, but it meant a lot for the women. In fact, when Mike was here from the university, and the first day that he came to me, and I was like in a meeting where we were talking about the problem of menstrual hygiene, and because these small things, but the way they affect women, because you are ignoring that area where you have low cost options of sanitary napkins available, but because of ignorance you don't go in for that, and you are using some old traditional, you are still resorting to those practices which are very unhealthy, very unhygienic, which unknowingly is leading to far greater wastage in the family by putting women to risk of getting cervical cancer or RTI or STI. So we were looking at this problem, and thankfully in 3 months we could come up with some very good models in our gender resource centers which encourage the use of sanitary napkins, providing them at half the cost of what was available in the market. But what I needed to do was bringing a lot of private players in it. The best of companies, whether it was Procter & Gamble, Johnson & Johnson. So all these, they had an association, it's called FIHA, for the infant hygiene, and Women's Hygiene Association, manufacturing sanitary napkins. So they really agreed that, okay, it's for the poor, so we'll give it at half the cost. But as government, my role was to facilitate that to happen. So I felt that otherwise also in the the corporates have come up with highly collaborative models, but they wait for the government to come up with first approach them, and it worked when it came to many of our agendas of women empowerment. Okay, so this is the kind of when I say that for reaching out to the community, we did not segment into their needs. We looked at their need for information and legal awareness also. We looked at their needs for non-formal education. Again, it meant so much to them. Many of the centers which I visited, or Richa would have done, women of even in their 50s and 60s who had never been to school, but they came up with their notepads, and it really meant a lot to them, and it meant so little for us in terms of resources to provide just one instructor for non-formal education. But their sense of empowerment by being able to read and write was huge. They can now send a letter. Nutrition awareness, that's another thing where we found that there was a need of bringing about that change in their behavior, and look at low cost options readily available, but which as a part of the custom women tended to ignore, because it was always said that women eat at the last and in the very end when the whole family has been fed. That was a part of our custom, where you don't even grumble with if there's no food left. You're supposed to kind of take it with grace, and also if there's less food, then you're supposed to give more to boys than the girls. So we have been trying to educate the women that it's not just you, but the kind of damage which happens if you're ignoring yourself is also in terms of your family and your children which are still to be born, and other girls in their adolescent age not fed well, resulting in malnourished children. So it's a whole vicious circle, and we are fighting this, I would say this it's a huge challenge, because the figures of malnutrition, despite the fact that we have resources, but it's also that customary practice too, where you're refusing to acknowledge the fact that how important the diet is in your life. So we are encouraging a kind of a feedback loop system through these centers, where you look at grievance. There's somebody in the center to listen to their grievance, Because otherwise, like in our typical departmental setup, we did not have people to whom they could talk to. So now you have a system, at least with us community-based organizations, who are more responsive to be listening and to be understanding their needs and to funnel it further. This is how, like, the centers kind of look like. I remember the day we gave a logo to ourselves, which is also like where when you see this thing with a red dot, which we adopted for mission control. And today, it's a treat for my eyes to see it behind the buses, on the bus hoardings and bus two shelters. But there was obviously a dream with it. But this is a the kind of bindi that I'm wearing. So it's a lady. It represents a woman.
Excuse me. When you launched your big program, you had pictures of hands with wording on the top. Is that also one of the mission's logos?
Yeah, it is the logo for the national mission.
Oh.
Now this logo was for my Delhi's Delhi Convergence program, and for the national mission. In fact, this is the picture, and I've also tried to, again, have some dreams, woven around this logo, which one has talked about here.
What do the words say in English on the top?
Sorry?
What do the words say above the
top?
hands? Yeah.
On the top, it's Mission Poon Shakti, holistic empowerment. Yeah. But the logo, it's explained, so, if you have a look at it.
Yes.
Then, in terms of in the Delhi's model, like when we said that we created the general resource centers, so they did manage to provide that, that missing outreach, mechanism that, provide people with a voice, the women especially with a voice, in the general resource center. But these are women's spaces, you can come and talk collectively, air issues, even if they are your grievances, but at least, and it really makes a lot of difference. Like, one of the centers that I went to, this girl, when I said, okay, so how are you and everything is fine and no problems, she says, no problem and it is very good and she is learning something. And, I said, why, are you going to school? She said, no. Why don't you go to school? She says, no, because my father isn't allowing me to go. Says, why? Because it's not secure and, there are like boys who are around in the, colony and I have to travel a long way. So, they tease me and it's. So I said, well, so isn't that a problem? So then she said, yeah, kind of, but, so you just accept it without questioning it. But these collective spaces, then allow you to, look upon these things which are like so detrimental to your, progress in life. So they did bring about, I felt that, a lot of awareness. When I say I, in the sense like, the general assessment of the program is that it has resulted in immense awareness about rights and entitlements and government programs as a whole, which we were earlier trying to, just make it into a preserve of our department. And to the extent that, then it becomes, a monopoly, even the knowledge about how you can access, where are the forms, like in this age of transparency and, we were in another meeting talking about technology and, so I realized that we are guarding our, the application forms for the various schemes. So they are they're so difficult to get the application form. Whereas all you need is to, put it on the computer and you can download it. But we, somewhere down the line, we have different standards when it, comes to having access facilitated, for those who are better off. So, so making it easier for people to, access what the form looks like and to be able to fill the form and create that demand, generate that pressure. The door-to-door, survey that we did, the identification of the poor that I said I'll not go into details of, but we covered 6 million people. So, and bringing about the kind of data which could, then bring to the fore the vulnerability of different categories of people. which again generated a lot of pressure on our own system to plan, because now you have an accurate estimate of the target group across different government programs. We knew, how many rat pickers we had. We knew how many construction workers we had. We knew how many, separated women are there, or disabled women are there, or elderly are there. Then, that led to, greater demand, greater allocation of funds, greater utilization of budget. Even though we could not fulfill everybody's demand. Because, it was said that, well, now you have to wait for next year. Next year we'll allocate more. But earlier I felt that there was no system of making that, accurate, projection in your, budget reallocations. Because when we started Mission Convergence, then, I just asked one of the secretaries of social welfare that, how would you, make a budget for, say, widow pension? So she said that, well, last year it was 6,000. So, I'll ask for 10% more. Yes, so that is the kind of basis. And you would know that this is how we work now. So, towards the end, when you have more numbers coming in, you'd say that, well, I'm limited because of my budget. But the fact is that you never, made a realistic budgetary projection and allocation. It became like a defeating proposition over the period. So that helped, and believe me, the number jumped 16 times, the very next year in terms of those who could cover, because we had, thrown our demand. That, well, these are the numbers, so we need more funds. Even if, it gets done through the department, through the elected representatives. So that was beside the point, because there was also a tension going that who would get the credit, whether NGOs get the credit or, elected representatives get the credit. So there was so that tension is another thing which I can't afford to go into details right now. So, and of course, the civil society groups, having a platform to be in an ongoing dialogue with the government to influence our policy, which is very healthy. Because normally we've been used to kind of adversarial relationship. So it was good that, you were sitting across the table and wanting to, their voices. And of course, these usual things did happen. For the women to be coming out with greater confidence and, increase in their incomes. There were large number of cases which kept informing us that, how much the skill augmentation helped. What was also significant was, different departments using our platform for outreach across different sectors. Some of the insights, from the model for engendering the planning process, that need to have dedicated mechanism for women that, which does cut across, different programs and bringing the women's issues at the center stage. And these platforms also need to look at social mobilization so that the gaps is reduced with the community. And that integrated approach, as I said, was very vital, and a life cycle approach, now being able to then track through the entire life cycle. And we've also felt that of critical significance was need to have a mechanism for a dynamic database. Because that one-time exercise, we felt that of our census, doing it every 10 years, or our BPL survey, that's the below poverty line survey, identifying the poor, which used to be done every 5 years. However, there are people who ascend and descend into poverty. So the same goes for the vulnerability of a woman. So you cannot have a static kind of a policy where you're looking after every 5 years to identify. So you need to have a dynamic database. And what worked, the collaborations, the huge NGO, CSO, private sector, community, platforms which are easily accessible, and the regular building of capacity mentoring, which was done nearly on a day-to-day basis. I can tell you that all of us as a team have been involved into that regular dialogue. So that carrot and stick, I will not describe, but a lot of incentivization also. And then, standard setting by the government, minimum benchmarks as to how NGOs perform. Because we make them feel that you're like, equally accountable, and now you're going to be responsible as partners with the government, to conform to certain minimum benchmarks. And there was a regular accountability put on them by our concurrent system of monitoring and evaluation by having the system of a mother NGO over and above the NGOs whose work was meant to look at whether the kind of resources that we're putting into our NGOs to deliver, whether that's been put to correct you. Now this was something rare, which normally we don't do for our government programs. We normally do once a year audit. It's time, right? Yeah, I know. Okay, so let me just leave at, I'll not go into challenges and all that. So that's it. Yeah.
Skip the challenges.